Today is Christmas Day. John Chrysostom, speaking on the Incarnation, says, "This day he who is born, and he who is becomes what he was not." That's a quite profound quote if you think about it, that Christ, who already was, who's eternal, who's uncreated, the second member of the Trinity, comes down and takes on human flesh. So he who is already is born. But then he becomes what he was not, for he never had a human flesh. This is the glory of Christmas. This is the glory of the gospel message in Christmas. And I want to just take a few moments, as many will see on social media. People will point to the tree, people will point to the star, people will point to Christmas Day and say these are somehow pagan holdovers. But the story of Christmas itself centers on Jesus Christ. What better way to witness to the world? Everyone celebrates Christmas Day than to say this is about Christ. Our very calendar is about Christ. And all these correlations with paganism are silly. Trees have always been around. What's the origin of the Christmas tree? It's not from the Old Testament. Christmas wasn't around yet. People point to these verses. Nonsense. It started in Germany, and it had a celebration for Adam and Eve to teach illiterate people the gospel story. And so they'd put red apples or red fruits, right, to symbolize a fruit that Eve ate, and they would decorate a tree, and they would have these plays, and it would commemorate Christmas. And this just simply caught on. The star, people say this was a Roman pagan star, but it's simply the Star of David in the scriptures. These things should not be contentious. Christmas was not a day first celebrated by pagans that the Christians copied. Rather, the dating for Christmas is based on the death of Christ. So there was this belief of divine symmetry in the early church that Jesus' birth would follow 9 months after his death and vice versa. And so whether this is the exact date or not, very early on, Christians began to celebrate this, not because of Sol Invictus or some other pagan rather, the winter solstice, which would land on like the December 22nd, because that's the highest day of the sun, and many people did worship the sun god. These are just correlating. They're not causating, right? So there might be every single day, in a sense, has some pagan ritual in it, right? Or some pagan has done something on some day that we wouldn't agree as Christians, but that doesn't make that day unholy. We can, as Christians, not just take days back, but recognize them as God-given. So December 25th is just a day that we set aside as a holiday or holy day to recognize the birth of Christ. And there's lastly two things that I think is a bit schizophrenic by Christians. On one hand, there's many who are saying there's a war on Christmas, that people aren't honoring Christmas enough. And on another hand, there are those who are fighting against Christmas because it's pagan or because it was from the Roman Catholic Church, or they're fighting against it just by not practicing it in a reverent way. So how can we call the world to celebrate Christmas or to recognize its true meaning when we ourselves, in a sense, fight against it or don't even honor it? I mean, try finding a church that has a Christmas Day service in your area. There's not many. Even Christmas Eve, right? Not many are even going to have an evening service on Christmas Eve. Holidays, or holy days, the term comes from, have turned into family days. This is what the world has done. And rather than the church bringing people in to hear the gospel message, that's how it used to be, right? Grandma would say, we're all going to church, and whether grandkids or even kids were active church members, they would go because of grandma, right? And today, rather than saying, we're Christians, we're going to go to church, we're going to say, we're going to stay home, not to pressure the people who aren't Christians to somehow go to church. And we're going to, rather than celebrate Christ, just have another family day like Thanksgiving. And this is the schizophrenic part of it, right? Is that how can we expect the world to honor Christmas and value it and not have a war on it? And at the same time, we don't value it ourselves. We don't honor this Advent season. We don't hold it in high esteem to where our children are being taught and church celebrations are ongoing. But all these things should happen. We should make the most of Christmas. Christmas should be the biggest thing for Christians. We need to buy more presents and do more decorations, have more celebrations, not because they're about consumerism or lights or glitz and glam, but so that we can point people to Christ in these times. That's my take. Have a blessed Christmas and Merry Christmas and Happy New Year.